Okay, so thanks everybody who's joining us this evening for our first live stream of They Call Me Coach. I'm going to just start by quickly telling you about the show, what we aim to do, what we hope to get out of it over these coming weeks. You don't reach all the goals that you've set for yourself. Sometimes it can be a bit lonely and melancholy. So I like to reach out to coaches and just talk to them and share some experiences. So off the back of that film, I decided that I was going to do that as a regular thing. I was going to go around the country and just talk to coaches either that I really respect or coaches that I think are doing really interesting things, or coaches that I've just never spoken to, but I've always wanted to have the opportunity to do that. So, Coach, you've spent the last few years collaborating with a handful of UK clubs, giving opportunities to UK kids and to European kids to experience coaching from a variety of different coaches across Europe. What's the benefit for the kids and the coaches getting involved in those types of experiences?
I think there's a big benefit because there's different cultural differences, and the culture in Europe is so much different. And I spent the past 6 years traveling to Europe and just sitting there in amazement on how their junior basketball is run. The difference is it's ran so professionally, and I think the issue we have and what we need to catch up with, and it's how football is already. How many 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds do we have within this country that we train that are pros? Because you can start at the beginning, like development stages, but we don't have any pro players that are playing at 14, 16, 17, 18. They have pros from 14. They have pros at 15, 16. And everybody will know Luka Doncic, and he was at Real Madrid. And when I would go over, I kept hearing about this phenom, Luka Doncic. Is 15. He was Kareem's roommate, and at 16, the men's team said, "You're not playing no more junior ball." Didn't play any international. He didn't play for Slovenia. He concentrated on playing for ACB, the men's, and they nurtured him because I don't feel we're in the situation to where we're developing pro players not because we don't have the coaches or the players, it's just the infrastructure, and it's just our system, and it's the investment. And I think that's the one difference between England and I'm just using Spain as an example. I would go to one of their practices. They would have like 8 staff there. They'd have 2 people doing the clock. They'd have a physio. They'd have 2 assistant coaches. They would have everything on timer. It's so much more professional at an early age. And so when you get to European championships, what you have is you have a lot of European teams. Players are already played against a lot of the top players because of their European competitions, and they're already within that pro regiment. Getting up early, doing 2-3 practices a day.
Okay, so look, you've actually answered about 3 of the other questions I was going to ask you. So
I apologize.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So look, am I right in thinking that you have done your level 4?
Yes, I've done my level 4. It took me. That was a journey. It took me 6 years, or 5 to 6 years, just to get on the course. So, but yes, I've done it. It was a very harrowing and scary experience going back to school, and I had to speak to a couple of friends because I did doubt myself, but I got through it with help of some mentors. I got through it with hard work, but the key thing for me was when I spoke to my tutors, and I thought it was good for them to tell me. They thought with me coming onto the course that I would be a Mr. Know-it-all because of my playing history. And I had a lot of tacit knowledge. I didn't even know what tacit knowledge was. I've been through every level of basketball, from grassroots, being cut at every level, at junior level, playing at every level, junior, playing for men's, playing for GB, just doing everything. But that course, what it did, it showed me about research. It showed me about reflection, mindset, philosophy, long-term player development. It showed me about a lot of the faults that I had as not only as a coach but as a person, and I just put it into my everyday life because nobody's perfect. So I've got to give a big shout out to John Trower at UClan and also Brian, because those guys are top guys, and I think as a sporting course, that's one of the best things I've ever done. And I didn't do it to just to have a level 4. I did it to challenge myself. But for me, it's not about what you've got behind your name, PhD, academia. It's about how can you relate to players. What is your journey? How do you relate to yourself? And that's one of the key things for me, because when you have to deal with stakeholders like parents, when you have to deal with the players, and they're telling you the issues they have off the court, whether they're from a white outer estate or a rural area or a hard inner city area, and they're on the cuffs of getting involved with gangs, selling drugs. This is life. And these are the things, as a coach, it's not just about coaching, it's about the off-court stuff. And these are the types of players that are playing our games. So for me, it's the whole journey, and I want to learn every day.
Look, I really kind of empathize with what you say about how difficult it is to firstly access that course, because that's a real, even if you just go on Google right now, it's pretty tough to find out very much information about the level 4. And there's a few people out there that think or feel that they're ready to get something more in terms of their CPD, and that is one route. It's not the only way to improve yourself as a coach, clearly, but having spoke to a half a dozen guys that have been through that process, there is some real kind of benefit there. There is some opportunities to share that knowledge and share that depth of kind of evaluation and observation and analysis of you as a coach, of the game itself, and how I think ultimately it's about how you apply it. Because, like you say, you can have letters after your name, but that doesn't make you a better basketball coach. So I would like to know, having been through that process, can you give me maybe one, just in terms of time? I wish we had a bit more time, but can you give me one thing that's maybe you've changed as a result of that?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny, and it shows my age. One of my players who I coached from like 9, 10 years old, and he'll remain nameless. And if he's listening, he'll know who he is. Had him at Warriors, came through the program, had him in my college academy team, went off to university, and came back and played for us. And it was after the first few games, and he goes, "Coach, you're so mellow. You've changed. You're not shouting. You're not because I'm listening. I'm letting them talk, and I'm not being this shouting and being totalitarian or autocratic." Yeah, and I said, we was in a game. I always remember we was playing Thames Valley Tigers away, no, Thames Valley Cavaliers away, and we was down with our team. We always get down by 20 points before we start playing. So I called a timeout, in the timeout, and the only reason I did that was after I did it, I turned to him and I goes, "Is that what you're missing?" And he just looked at me and smiled, and I reverted back to being calm. So how I've changed it about keeping. This is just me. Philosophies is keeping things simple, letting the players learn from their mistakes, let them question you, but at the same time, they know I'm confident. They know I'm driving the bus, and that's the whole thing. As a coach, I'm just a bus driver. If somebody wants to get off to go to the service station to get a sandwich, I pull over. But we're leaving in 10 minutes. If you're late, we're going. So I'm just the driver. They want to sleep, So I'm just the driver, and I've learned that from doing my coach. But I've still got a lot more to learn.
could you give me your thoughts on what you think coaches should be doing in the off season? And I ask that question because as coaches, we
Why?
often direct our athletes, our players, to do their work in the off season. But what do you think coaches should be doing to improve their game in the off season?
Well, coaches, I think it's a lot of it is reflection. A lot of good coaching material out there. Obviously, you're going to go to camps, CPDs, you're going to have mentors. But what the key thing for me is, as a coach, what is your philosophy? What are you about? And you've got to know yourself as a coach. Once you know yourself as a coach, you know your philosophy, then you look at what's your pathway by the governing body. It could be set by your club. But then ultimately you may not be able to follow those pathways. So it's like I say to my players, do you play basketball or are you a basketball player? Both of them are fine in coaching. Do you want to coach for fun? Do you just want to coach National League? Or do you want to take it more serious and be an international coach where you've got to study, where you've got to watch hours of video, where you've got to reflect when you have knockbacks, where you've got to reflect when you win, when you've got to reflect when you have issues with players or parents. So mistakes, because you learn from your mistakes. And another key thing is to let your players help you. So, and what I mean by that is too many times, and I've been there as a coach, where we want it to be about ourselves. So when it comes to a game on the weekend, you've worked on a play and you want it to run really nice and you score and you're like, yeah. But the beauty of basketball is it's simple. It's about stops and scores. This is what I tell my players. I don't care if we miss 50 shots, as long as we get stops and we score on the other end, whether we run offenses or not. That doesn't mean you're not coaching, but you look at the simplistics of the game. Get stops and scores, but then we can make it complicated by running flow or horns or flex or rotation or wheel. And certain players' IQ don't work with plays. So for me, it's the thing is, keep it simple, stupid, and that's what I've learned. And it's taken me a long time to learn that, but that's just how I look at things.
Well, look, you talked about coaching at different levels, and I know that you're involved in community level basketball, like literally getting kids their first opportunity to touch a basketball and hopefully fall in love with the game. I know that you coach National League, and I know that also last summer you were involved in the GB program, and this week, I don't know if you heard. Kind of Pops Mensabonsu and
Yeah,
Luol Deng kind of waxing lyrical about their opinions and maybe some of the shortcomings of kind of national team basketball in the UK.
yeah, yeah.
Having been involved as a coach in the GB program, what was your experience like?
Well, that's a two-pronged question. First of all, you said about the development. I think we have like 60, 70, 80 kids on a Saturday morning. Hits, Connor, we've got Mebs, we've got a lot of coaches, Brett, that come in, work, and it's about taking beginners of all sizes, disabilities, creeds, and color. It's about inclusivity. It's about we talked about this before. For me, it's about diversity. And she said, have you seen the Pops and Deng thing? I said, well, I've seen a link. I've not looked at it. Sent me the information, and I've had a look at it, and I have to agree with Pops and Lawal, because people are scared to talk about diversity. I'm not scared about talking about diversity. I'm a mature guy, and I still have to deal with racism. It's going on in football. As a coach, I feel it. Not saying when I coach, but I feel I've got to be a certain way. And for me, with what Pops and Lawal was saying, where is the diversity at that top level? I talked at a Sport England conference on a panel, and one of the things was from one of the governing bodies. they said, well, we're not used to dealing with people of color because there's nobody in our area. So we don't actually know how to engage. So when I'm hearing these types of things, and a lot of people don't know, yes, I'm a coach, but there's my thing is working with excluded kids. My thing is working with people on the cuffs of crime. When somebody has stabbed somebody and they've had to go to, I deal with a lot of stuff. But when you're dealing and you're doing talks and people are saying to you they don't know how to deal with people of color because they don't see them, sports shouldn't see no color. And they're afraid. I'm not afraid to talk about it because I deal with racism a lot. But you know what? I smile because I see it as ignorance. And it's all, for me, it's all about education because I feel, and I'm just talking about within coaching, we can get caught up with wins and losses. But the key is it actually paying the bills? There's more to life than coaching. There's more to life. Coaching's easy, life's hard. So when you can separate those two things, and I don't think a lot of times we do that as coaches because we think it's about, oh, we've got to win. If we don't win, we don't get paid. We've got to recruit this person. But let's be honest. We have players from 12 to 19 years old. Then we let them go, whether it's to America or wherever else. But I can feel confident and say we've had players and they've become doctors, they've become RAF engineers, solicitors, lawyers, working in sports. And that's what it's about, getting education, getting a job.
Tell me about the GB experience in particular, because you said you agree with Pops and with Lowell at some levels about maybe
You
maybe
look over,
it's about the lack of diversity.
do you know what? And this is the thing, this is the myth. And it happens a lot. It happens in football. And I see whether it's Raheem Sterling, a lot of ex-football players who are trying to be coaches, is they think that there's certain things we can't do, but we can. And for me, if you look over since I think I got involved in 2008, if you look from 2008 to the present day, how many coaches of color have been within the system? And it's no knock on the system. It's just talking fact. So is it saying that coaches of color aren't good enough to represent their country, or is it saying that coaches of color aren't qualified? I coach at Division 1 level. I coach at different levels, and I see so many great coaches, whether they're Asian, whether they're white, whether they're male or female. And it's all about opportunity. I feel we got too many gatekeepers or too many people who feel that they're entitled when you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, okay, what have you actually done to earn that position? What gives you the right to command and hold that position? It's about a fair playing field. And for me personally, I don't see that. But if I can put my head above the parapet because that it doesn't pay my bills. And I can be honest because I've been there and I've been rejected to where people are being overlooked. But we just need to work together. If we work together, we can make things better. But it's a struggle. But it's not just in basketball. You look at football, you look at athletics, you look at all sports, and you speak to coaches of color, and they will tell you the same thing. Because when you go up that, what do you call it, that pyramid, what happens, CJ?
Well, the opportunities get fewer and fewer. So
Okay,
you've got to be in it to win it, right? Because I think
of course.
the flip side of that coin, Karl, is that there are people who take themselves out of the fight because they believe that the system is already rigged.
I agree. And you know what? I was one of those people. That's why I stepped away from the national team for 4 years. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to complain. I'm going to step away and I'm going to forge my path because that's how we're built. You don't complain. I don't do stuff on social media. You go away and went on my course. And because I've got a level 4, a postgraduate diploma, start my master's in August, that is just to say, oh, Carl's a level 4. No, I'm still the same guy. But sometimes you need it. So when you go for interview and it's all about the paperwork and optics, oh, level 4, he's done this, he's done that. But does that mean you can actually coach because you've got the paperwork? That's my
Not,
question to you, CJ.
not necessarily. Not necessarily.
And you know the thing for me, and I'll say this to you is, I know there's a lot of coaches out there that if they're playing a team on the Saturday, they will watch so much video on all the plays that you're running. Do you know what I do, CJ? I don't mind who's listening. What I do is they're going to be looking at, okay, last week they ran a zone. Last week they did this. I'll just go into my playbook, get the players, and we'll run something else because my players know how we do things. So coaches will be, oh, why aren't they running this? Why aren't they start or change my starting lineup? Just little things. And I've seen how coaches react, and I just smile to myself because basketball for me is fun. I love it. I love going against the coaches, having a talk with them after, and I love learning from a lot of the younger coaches, at all levels. And I will give them a hard time during the game, but after the game, if we get beat or we win, I'll always congratulate or say, look, next time you may get us. But coaching for me is fun, and being in the coaching fraternity is something to where I like. But also with the pops and yes, Loire does his camp, is top 50, and we have players that are clamoring to get on that top 50 camp. And I knew Loire when he was 15, 16, worked on his first camp when he was down in Sevenoaks. But these are the types of people we need within the game. It's about connecting people. It's about talking and communication. We can agree. Let's work. It's about working together. And we always talk about it, but can we do it? We're missing the point. It's about those players. We're subservient to those players. And I think sometimes as coaches, we forget that.
That's a great point, and that brings me on to probably my last question. Well, not my last question. I always say that to my kids. Look, this is the last drill we're going to do. I never mean it, so I'm not going to say it's my last question. But you've talked a little bit about the state of coaching in the UK, and you said that our challenge as a country isn't necessarily about the quality of coaching, but what would you say is our responsibility as a coaching fraternity to make sure that we elevate the game of basketball for the next generation of players and coaches?
For me, it's simple. Be honest. Be honest. Because for me, I speak to a lot of parents who have been on the national team programs, who have just been involved in basketball, and their sons or daughters are like 19, 20, and they've had horrible experiences in the States, and there's no direction. We have to be honest with players. It's not about getting players in to your clubs, academies, or teams, using them up and spitting them out. It's long term. It's about when they're not doing well, helping them. If they're not in the right situation, find them another situation. For me, it's about being honest. It's about providing the right opportunities. And I go back to what I said before. When I watched how Real, and they're one of the top teams in Europe, but a lot of European teams will work how they do. They have the investment, the coaching infrastructure. If we could have that, if we want to be a serious nation, we have to develop pros from 14 years old. That's what football does. That's what Europe does. So you look at Kareem Queeley. He was at our club, and I use it as an example because he went through it. He was at our club from 10, 11 years old. He was averaging like 50, 60, 70 points a game. And we let him go because we couldn't provide what he needed. And I looked at a long-term vision. He went over to Madrid and he was in a professional environment. And at 18 years old, he signed a 3-year professional contract. It's going to be tough because when you become a pro, you got to put in the work. So, but you've got to have that work ethic. And I look at, you said about national teams. Last year with my under-20s team, I had 2 pros on that team. And we had 12 players, but the dynamics for me was great because you had players who were playing in England. You had players coming back from the States who were the coaches had them just as defensive players. Then you had 2 guys in Spain, Jacob Brown and Kareem Queeley. And you could see the natural difference, the body type. They had cuts. You could see they were working on their weights, their regime, the way they played, the way they picked up the plays, the way they played the game, and the way they brought the players with them. So it was great that we had 2 pros. The other guys were good, but they didn't have the same aura or mentality as these 2 players because they played with some of the top players in Europe. And if we could get to that type of level here, we have the coaches that can deliver on that. But it's about infrastructure and investment. And, I'm an old gray guy, and I don't know how much time I got left, but I know I'm joking. But I've seen this as a player. I've seen this when I first started coaching, and we're still talking about it now. When is it going to change? And who's going to change it? Whose responsibility is it? How are we going to get the investment and the right people in the right places? That's my question to you, CJ.
Well, look, that's a question, unfortunately, that I'm not solely qualified to answer. But look, I feel for as long as we stay involved in the game, there's a chance for change to happen because I'm not here just to ride on the bus. I want to be driving the bus as well. So I think it's all of our responsibility. I think it's easy, and it has been easy to throw stones at the governing body. I don't know a single governing body that has funding that is trying to do detrimental things for their sport. I know that our governing body is trying to do the right things. Whether they do the right things all the time, I don't think anybody does the right things all the time. And I'm equally not saying, don't throw stones because it's us that have to keep the governing body honest because we're a membership organization. So it's not a question I can answer, but equally, I'm not going to shy away from it and say I'm not willing to suggest ways that we can do things differently.
It's not, and that's the cop out, not you, CJ. It's not. This isn't about the governing body. I don't think I've said anything about the governing body. I mentioned Real Madrid as a club. I'm talking about clubs being more professional. That's how you develop the players. It's not the governing body developing the players within the club. It's about giving players from an early age that professional mindset and giving them that route through. Then they play for their national teams, and that's their stage to showcase if they need to. So for me, one thing I wouldn't do is throw stones. For me, when I coached national teams, I knew going in there, the governing body would support me as much as they could as a coach. I knew the deficiencies. That didn't affect me. And it brings me back to when I first started coaching. Yes, there's issues, but as a coach, you do not make excuses. What you do is you cut your cloth accordingly and you make sure you know what you're getting into. So if you're coaching for the governing body and national teams, why are you going to throw stones? There's no need. You know what you're getting into. Do the best you can and try and win some games and make it a great experience for your players, because it's not about you as the coach. You're just a bus driver. You've got to steer the bus, keep the discipline, let the players have fun and win some games the best we can.
Coach, you've been amazing for our first show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, man.
I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing some anecdotes and sharing a bit of your philosophy.
Yeah.
I would love you to come back on another show.
Whenever you're ready. I'm in lockdown, man. I got nothing else to do. This is the best. Look at me. I know a lot of people haven't seen me. I've not shaved in about 3. Usually I'm smooth with a fade, no barbers. But before I go, I want to say, big shout out to you, CJ. You do an amazing job. I've worked with you on our camps in Spain. You put amazing videos together and all the stuff you do down in Solent. And I've seen that program grow. And I want to give a shout out to Matt Guyman and his crew. And I'm not embarrassing, and I've known Matt and shown my age. And since he's been 12, 13, 14 years old, coming on Steve Bucknell's camp, he was one of our top players. His dad, Jimmy, he's one of the greats in the BBL. And Matt has done an excellent job transitioning from a player to a coach, and I love everything that he does down at Solent. And a couple of years ago when they lost to Loughborough, he was a bit down. I think they came second by points, and he's hung in there. And he does have one of our Warriors players, Elliot Sentence. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Elliot Sentence, my boy, my man. And I tell you what, Matt's done an excellent job with Elliot because he's a bit crazy and out of control, but he's matured as a man. This is the best basketball I've seen Elliot play under control, and he's my white son. He'll call me his black father. So, excellent. Matt's done a great job with him and his coaching staff, and everything Matt's doing is great. Obviously, not losing the game, winning the league and all the cups and trophies. And the next step is maybe Euro League and the BBL. Who knows? I'll leave that to Matt.
Who knows? Look, I'm sure Matt and the guys at the club, I feel like I'm in a really fantastic situation down here. We're all contributing, we're all inspired by what our men's program's doing, our women's program's doing really well, our junior program this week's our awards week. So we thank you for the thank you, and thank you so much for taking the time out for talking to us, Coach.
Keep up the great work, man.
We'll try. Thanks, everyone. Thanks
Peace
for
out.
watching our
Cheers.
first show. Peace out
all
to
right.
everyone.
All right.
Stay safe and stay at home.